Ever think about how much your clothes say about you without you even having to open your mouth? It's like they have their own kind of secret language, right? Sharing little bits of who you are, how creative you feel, even where you fit in the bigger picture.
It's really wild when you stop and think about it. Yeah. Like all these little choices we make every day about what to wear, how to put it all together, it's all saying something.
For sure. And that's exactly where we're headed today, diving deep into this whole world of fashion. You've gathered some pretty awesome sources for us, so our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to break it all down. I mean, we're talking everything. What it even is, its crazy history, the big names who've shaped it, the business side of things, how trends come and go, and even what the future of fashion might look like. And of course, we got to keep it interesting along the way. No falling asleep allowed.
Exactly. We want to distill it all down, make it clear and engaging, but without skimping on the good stuff. From pure artistry to how it affects the whole world, we're covering it all.
Okay, so first things first. What even is fashion, really? It's got to be more than just the clothes in our closets.
Right. It's way bigger than that. As your sources point out, it's a language. But when we speak through what we choose to wear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, clothes are a big part of it, but it's also shoes, accessories, even colors. And it's not just what we wear, but how we wear it. All of that creates this image, this first impression we give off.
So I get that people have always dressed for status, or protection from the elements. But when did this idea of fashion, the way we think of it now, really get going?
Most folks point to the Renaissance, particularly what was going on with European royalty and the super rich back in the 14th century. That's when you start to see trends popping up and spreading through society. Of course, the story doesn't end there. Technology played a huge role, like the invention of the sewing machine in the 19th century. That, along with the whole textile industry taking off, really changed how fashion developed, made it more accessible, and way faster moving.
So it starts with the elite, gets a tech boost, and then how does it become this mirror for what's going on in society? Because your sources really emphasize that connection.
It's fascinating how closely fashion mirrors periods of, economic boom and cultural change. Take the Baroque era, for example.
Right.
All that crazy opulence, super luxurious fabrics, over-the-top designs. It wasn't just about looking good. It was about showing off wealth and power. Compare that to the 1960s, when youth culture really exploded. The miniskirt and less structured clothing weren't just new styles. They were a symbol of breaking free from tradition, a whole vibe of liberation.
That's a pretty stark contrast. And then you've got figures like Coco Chanel in the 20th century completely changing the game.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Chanel's idea of casual elegance was revolutionary. It wasn't just about looking chic. It was about comfort and clothes you could actually live in. That idea became a cornerstone of modern fashion. And now you've got everything from haute couture, which is like the peak of fashion, with those one-of-a-kind handmade pieces, to streetwear, which is all about personal expression.
It's like we can choose our own fashion dialect now. But it's not just about how we see ourselves, right? Fashion reflects bigger societal things, too.
Totally. If you zoom out a bit, fashion's always reflecting what's happening politically and socially. Changes in how we view gender, race, class, even the environment, it all shows up in how fashion evolves.
Your sources mention the civil rights movement of the 60s specifically. How did fashion play into that?
It's interesting how fashion became a tool for Black empowerment during that time. Like the Afro hairstyle, embracing bright African prints, wearing traditional African clothing. These weren't just fashion choices, they were statements of cultural pride and identity.
That's a powerful example. And what about today? What's driving fashion now?
Well, social media is huge, obviously. Instagram and all that, it's like a global runway. Trends can go viral in seconds. Then there's sustainability, which is getting bigger and bigger because people are starting to realize what our clothes are doing to the planet. And of course, inclusivity, making space for all body types, ethnicities, gender identities. That's really shaping things.
So it's like this ever-changing language evolving right along with us. Now let's rewind a bit. You mentioned ancient civilizations. What was fashion like back then?
Fashion has a long and fascinating history. In ancient civilizations like Egypt, Greece, and Rome, Clothes were mainly for protection, but they quickly became a way to show your status. The Egyptians, for example, were all about elaborate linen clothes, crazy jewelry, even wigs, makeup, perfumes. It was all about showing off wealth and beauty.
So even back then, clothes were sending a message. What about the Middle Ages? I imagine those strict social structures had a big impact on fashion.
Big time. In the Middle Ages, your clothes basically screamed your place in society. Nobility wore fancy stuff like velvet, silk, fur. Peasants were stuck with simple wool clothes. They even had sumptuary laws back then, rules about what each class could wear. Talk about rigid.
Wow, serious fashion police back then. Then comes the Renaissance, a time of huge change everywhere. What about fashion?
The Renaissance is where fashion starts to shift from just being about status to being about expressing your own style, your wealth, your taste. That's an idea that's still around today, right? With the rise of a merchant class and more trade, more people had access to nice fabrics. Clothes became a way to show off your wealth, power, refinement. You see elaborate embroidery, delicate lace, jewels everywhere. And this is when the corset really takes hold, shaping women's silhouettes for centuries.
Ah, the corset. Definitely a defining garment, but with some controversy too. Moving into the 18th century, we hit the Baroque period. My mind goes straight to powdered wigs and giant dresses. Am I close?
You got it. Baroque fashion was all about excess and extravagance. Think crazy decorations and dramatic shapes. The French court, under Louis XIV, they basically set the trends for everyone. Those huge wigs, super ornamented clothes, and fancy accessories weren't just fashionable. They were symbols of power and status for the aristocracy. It was the big contrast to the simple clothes of the lower classes.
Sounds like a very in-your-face era for fashion. What happened in the 19th century when the Industrial Revolution hit?
The Industrial Revolution changed everything, made fashion way more accessible for regular people. Mass production meant clothes could be made faster and cheaper. Fashion magazines popped up, spreading the latest trends to a wider audience. And that's when haute couture really takes off, with designers like Charles Frederick Worth paving the way for the luxury fashion houses we know today.
So it becomes more widespread, but also more focused on designers at the high end. Then the 20th century arrives, and with it, tons of social change. How did that impact fashion?
The early 20th century was a total revolution in women's fashion. Designers like Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, Jean Patou, they really shook things up. Chanel liberating women from corsets and introducing pieces like the little black dress. That was huge. And the 1920s, forget about it. Shorter hemlines, bob hair, more boyish looks. It reflected the whole post-World War I feeling of freedom, like we're breaking free from the old rules.
The Roaring 20s, for sure. What about after World War II? Dior's new look comes to mind.
Right, after all the wartime restrictions, Dior's new look in the late 40s was this deliberate return to femininity and luxury. Those full skirts, tiny waists, it was all about post-war glamour. Then the 50s and 60s, things changed so fast, driven by youth culture, social movement, celebrities. The 60s, with Mary Quant and Andre Carreges, that's when the miniskirt takes center stage, becoming this symbol of youth and freedom, breaking free from the more conservative styles.
The miniskirt, talk about a fashion statement. What about the 70s and 80s?
Those were decades of fusion, reflecting all the changes happening in society. You had everything from disco glam to power suits as women's roles were changing. Designers like Yves Saint Laurent and Gianni Versace, they're making such bold statements. And then there's punk rock, with Vivienne Westwood leading the charge. Talk about challenging fashion norms. Punk was all about DIY, anti-establishment, a real shock to the system.
Punk definitely left its mark. And as we get closer to the present, what was going on in the 90s and 2000s?
In the 90s and 2000s, you see this growing push for diversity and inclusivity in fashion. More body types, ethnicities, gender expressions are represented. Designers like Marc Jacobs and Alexander McQueen were pushing boundaries, mixing high fashion with streetwear. And the rise of supermodels, they made fashion this global spectacle.
Which brings us to fashion today. It seems like it's always changing, never standing still.
It really is. With all the focus on sustainability, the influence of digital culture and social media, fashion's more dynamic than ever. It's not just clothes. It's a living, breathing art form that's constantly reflecting our ever-changing world.
It's amazing to see how all these threads from the past have woven together to create the fashion landscape we see today. Now let's talk about the people who've really shaped it, the fashion icons. It's more than just wearing cool clothes, right?
Definitely more to it. Fashion icons, they go beyond trends. They define entire eras, they challenge the rules, they show us what's possible with fashion. They become these symbols, inspiring people with their creativity and personal style.
Let's start with a name everyone knows, Coco Chanel. What made her so revolutionary?
Chanel was a true game changer. She brought this idea of comfort and elegance to women's fashion that no one had seen before. She famously said, "Fashion is not something that exists in dresses only. Fashion is in the sky, in the street. Fashion has to do with ideas, the way we live, what is happening." That really sums up her whole philosophy. Pieces like the little black dress, the Chanel suit, the quilted handbag, they weren't just stylish, they were practical, and they gave women an alternative to the restrictive clothes of the time. Her focus on understated elegance is still so relevant today.
Timeless pieces, for sure. Who else stands out as a major figure in fashion history?
Yves Saint Laurent is another big one. He brought this fresh, sometimes even provocative energy to the 60s and 70s. When he created Le Smoking, a tuxedo suit for women, it was huge. It challenged all these ideas about what women should wear. It became a symbol of female power. He really blurred the lines between masculine and feminine style, and his work often reflected the social and cultural changes happening around him.
With smoking, that image is so powerful. What about icons whose impact came more from their personal style, how they wore clothes? Audrey Hepburn immediately comes to mind.
Audrey Hepburn, she was all about simplicity and grace. Her style was so elegant, effortless, timeless. She still inspires designers and everyday people today. Her work with Givenchy, especially that black dress and Breakfast at Tiffany's, is one of the most iconic fashion moments in film history. She became this symbol of timeless beauty, showing that true style isn't about chasing trends. It's about being yourself.
Such a good example of less is more. And Princess Diana, she really changed how we think about royal fashion.
Oh yeah, she totally revolutionized royal style. Her fashion choices were modern and relatable, which made her a global fashion icon. From that famous revenge dress to her more casual outfits, she showed that you could navigate royal life while still having your own personal style. She proved that even within all those rules and traditions, fashion could be a way to connect with people.
She definitely made royal style more approachable. And in music, you have someone like Madonna, who's always reinventing herself through fashion.
Madonna, the queen of pop. She's a perfect example of how fashion can be this constantly changing reflection of who you are. From those lace gloves and bracelets to her iconic corsets, her style was always bold and rebellious, just like her music. She was a pioneer in those celebrity designer collaborations, and she always pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in fashion.
She definitely wasn't afraid to make a statement. What about Kate Moss, who really defined the 90s look?
Kate Moss was the face of 90s cool, that minimalist, effortless vibe. Her heroin chic look was controversial, but it was super influential. She was a muse for all these big designers, and her personal style, often understated but always chic, became what everyone wanted to copy. She redefined beauty and fashion, showing that it's okay to be different, to stand out.
And more recently, who are some of the fashion icons shaping things today? Rihanna is a huge one.
Rihanna is a total force, no doubt. She's fearless, she's innovative, she mixes high fashion and streetwear so seamlessly. Whether she's on a red carpet in a couture gown or just out and about in a casual look, she's always ahead of the curve. Her collaborations with Puma and her own Fenty brand have made her a major player in the industry, breaking down barriers and pushing for inclusivity.
She definitely has her own unique style. And
Yeah.
Harry Styles has been making waves with his more fluid approach to fashion.
Harry Styles is redefining masculinity in fashion. He's so confident in wearing clothes that are traditionally seen as feminine, like skirts, blouses, heels. It's resonating with so many people. He's a real advocate for inclusive fashion, encouraging people to express themselves authentically and not be limited by gender stereotypes.
It's so cool to see how these individuals, each in their own way, have shaped not just what we wear, but how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the business side of fashion. It's a multi-billion-dollar global industry, right?
It's huge. From a designer's first sketch to the clothes hanging in stores, the fashion industry is a complex global machine. Understanding how it all works is key to understanding how trends are born, how clothes are made, and what we end up buying.
So break it down for us. How does a designer's idea end up in our closets?
It usually starts with designers creating collections, which they often show off at fashion weeks in the big fashion capitals. These events aren't just about artistry, they're about business, where buyers decide what to stock in their stores. Designers have to find this balance between their creative vision and things like production costs, what people want to buy, and what's trendy. You have haute couture, which is all about those super luxurious handmade garments, and then you have the mass market, clothes for everyone.
And once the designs are done, how does the actual production happen?
It depends. High-end brands often have their own ateliers, where everything's made by hand. But for most clothes, it's all about global factory networks, mostly in countries like China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, where labor's cheaper. Even the raw materials come from all over the world. It's a really intricate web.
And these factories are basically working to fill orders from retailers, right?
Exactly. Retailers, from high-end boutiques to fast fashion giants, place their orders months in advance, trying to guess what people will want to buy. Fast fashion is all about speed, getting those runway trends into stores ASAP at prices everyone can afford.
And then there's online shopping, which has totally changed retail.
Oh yeah, online shopping has exploded. Brick-and-mortar stores are still around, but e-commerce is where it's at. Online, you can shop anywhere in the world, get your stuff delivered fast, and return it easily. Social media is also a big sales driver now, with influencers having a huge impact on what people buy.
Marketing must be super important in such a visual industry.
It's crucial. You've got traditional advertising, runway shows, celebrity endorsements, and now the whole world of influencer marketing on social media. It's all about creating buzz and making people want the latest stuff.
And a big topic these days is sustainability and ethical fashion. How's that affecting the business side of things?
Sustainability and ethics are becoming really important. People are waking up to the environmental damage caused by fashion, the pollution, the waste, and how garment workers are often treated unfairly. This has led to the rise of eco-conscious brands using sustainable materials, reducing waste, and ensuring fair labor practices. It's not just a fad, it's what consumers are demanding.
And it makes good business sense too, right? Brands have to adapt if they want to stay relevant.
Exactly. Brands are under pressure to be more transparent about their supply chains. They're investing in things like fabric recycling and eco-friendly dyes to reduce their impact. It's changing how fashion is made and sold.
And inclusivity is another big conversation. How's the industry responding to calls for more inclusivity?
Diversity and inclusion are top priorities now. Brands are being pushed to be more inclusive in their advertising and, more importantly, in their designs, making clothes for all body types, ethnicities, and genders. We're seeing more size-inclusive brands and more gender-neutral fashion.
And fashion weeks, those big events we talked about earlier, how are they changing?
They're still key for launching collections and doing business, but they're evolving. Digital fashion shows have become a big thing, reaching a wider audience globally.
It sounds like the fashion business is never boring, always adapting to what consumers want and what's happening in the world. Now, let's dive into something a little less concrete. Fashion trends. What exactly is a trend?
A trend is basically when a certain style, color, material, or pattern becomes really popular for a while. It's like a collective movement, everyone wearing something similar as opposed to personal style. Trends can last for a season or for years.
And where do they come from? It can feel like they just appear out of thin air.
They can seem that way. But trends are actually shaped by a bunch of things. Culture, social movements, technology, media, designers, and of course consumers themselves. It's all connected.
Designers and their Fashion Week shows are seen as the starting point for a lot of trends, right?
Definitely a big starting point.
Mm.
Runway shows give us a sneak peek at what designers are thinking for the next season. The colors, the shapes, the overall vibe. Then you've got fashion critics, buyers, influencers. They all analyze those shows trying to figure out what's going to be big. And trends often come back around, with designers taking inspiration from vintage styles.
But it's not just about the runway anymore. Street style seems to be really influential now.
Oh yeah, street styles become huge. You have fashion enthusiasts and influencers creating these looks that are more relatable than what you see on the runway. These looks can go viral on social media and end up influencing designers and brands.
And celebrities and social media influencers are major trendsetters themselves.
They have so much power. What a celebrity wears, whether it's on a red carpet or just a casual outfit they post online, can make a trend explode. And influencers are basically tastemakers, promoting trends to their millions of followers.
And it feels like pop culture and social movements also play a big role in what we wear.
For sure. Look at how hip-hop culture shaped streetwear, or how punk brought in that rebellious aesthetic. Social movements like feminism and LGBTQ plus rights have pushed for things like gender-neutral clothing and body positivity, which are now influencing fashion design.
And fashion magazines, those traditional media outlets, did they still have a say?
Maybe not as much as they used to, but magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar are still trendsetters. They feature the big collections and have those expert opinions. And now, of course, you have fashion blogs and online influencers who are like the new fashion authorities.
Then there's fast fashion, which makes trends so accessible, but also raises some concerns.
Fast fashion is a double-edged sword. It gets those runway looks into stores quickly and cheaply, which is great for consumers. But it also contributes to this throwaway culture where we buy and discard clothes so quickly.
And technology itself is playing a bigger role in how trends are identified and spread.
Absolutely. Social media and digital marketing mean trends can go global in an instant. And you have things like virtual fashion shows, AI predicting trends, AR try-on experiences, all changing how we experience fashion.
So trends are this complex mix of influences, always changing. It's not just designers telling us what to wear. Now, let's look ahead. What's the future of fashion?
The future is pretty exciting. Technology, sustainability, and how consumers are behaving, it's all going to transform how fashion works.
Sustainability keeps coming up. What role will it play in shaping the future of fashion?
Sustainability is going to be central. As more people realize the environmental impact of fashion, we'll see a bigger focus on using eco-friendly materials, making clothes last longer, and reducing waste. Clothing rental services and swapping clothes could become more common too.
And technology is going to revolutionize things, right?
Totally. We're already seeing digital fashion for avatars and online worlds. AR and VR will change how we shop with virtual try-ons. AI could give us personalized recommendations and even predict future trends.
Inclusivity has been a big movement. Will that continue to shape fashion?
Definitely. Inclusivity isn't going away. We'll see more size-inclusive options, more gender-neutral clothing, and greater representation of different ethnicities, abilities, and ages. Fashion should be for everyone.
What about fashion events and shopping? How will those change?
Virtual fashion shows might become the norm, reaching a global audience online. E-commerce will keep evolving, with more personalized experiences using AR. Direct-to-consumer brands and shopping through social media will also grow.
It sounds like fashion is becoming even more personal and integrated with technology. And what about wearable tech?
Wearable tech is getting more sophisticated and more stylish. We have smart fabrics that can change color, adjust temperature, even monitor your health. Imagine clothes that react to the environment or clean themselves.
Self-cleaning clothes, now that's an idea I can get behind. And you mentioned virtual fashion for the metaverse. How big do you think that will get?
Virtual fashion has huge potential. It's like a limitless creative space where you can design anything. Big brands are already experimenting with it. Digital clothes could become a new kind of status symbol with virtual influencers showcasing these looks.
And AI, how's that being used in fashion?
AI is becoming a powerful tool. It can personalize recommendations based on your shopping habits. It can analyze data to predict trends and even help design clothes. It's also making supply chains more efficient and sustainable.
And blockchain, we usually hear about that with crypto. How does it relate to fashion?
Blockchain can bring much-needed transparency to the fashion industry. It can track where clothes come from, ensuring ethical sourcing and making it harder to sell fake goods. It can even help with reselling clothes securely.
So technology is really changing every aspect of the fashion industry. Now, let's go back to those fashion icons. How have they shaped global trends?
Fashion icons have had a huge impact on global trends, from the early Hollywood stars to today's social media influencers. They've all played a part in defining how we see and wear clothes.
Those old Hollywood stars, they were the epitome of glamour.
Like Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, Grace Kelly, Elizabeth Taylor, they were always dressed by the best designers, and their style became synonymous with classic glamour. Think of Hepburn's little black dress or Monroe's white halter dress. Those images are timeless.
Then the supermodels of the 90s came along, and they had their own impact.
The supermodels, names like Cindy Crawford, Naomi Campbell, Claudia Schiffer, Kate Moss, Linda Evangelista, they were global superstars. They brought in this era of minimalist chic, and their influence went way beyond the runway, shaping how everyday people dressed. Kate Moss and her heroin chic look, that was a defining image of the decade.
And musicians have always used fashion to express themselves and influence their fans.
Definitely. From David Bowie's androgynous glam rock look to the rise of streetwear with hip-hop artists like Run DMC, musicians have always pushed boundaries with their style. And today, you have Kanye West, Rihanna, they're still shaping fashion. They've redefined what it means to be a rock star, and modern artists are constantly pushing the envelope with their looks.
Now, with social media, we have a whole new generation of fashion icons.
Social media influencers have become super powerful. They can turn an everyday outfit into a viral trend. People like Chiara Ferragni and the Hadid sisters, they're blurring the lines between high fashion and street style, making fashion more accessible.
And of course, we can't forget the designers themselves. They're often icons in their own right.
For sure. Designers like Coco Chanel, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld, Jean-Paul Gaultier, they've all defined eras in fashion. And today, you have designers like Virgil Abloh, Demna Gvasalia, Alessandro Michel. They're shaping how we dress now, bringing in those streetwear vibes and challenging traditional beauty standards.
And beyond just influencing style, a lot of fashion icons use their platform to make statements about bigger issues.
They do. Fashion can be a powerful tool for social and political commentary, like Princess Diana's revenge dress, Michelle Obama wearing American designers, Zendaya challenging beauty norms. These are all examples of how fashion can send a message about identity, gender, race, and so much more.
It shows that fashion isn't just about clothes, it's about who we are and what we believe in. Now, let's talk about how globalization has impacted fashion. We live in a truly interconnected world.
Globalization has had a huge impact on fashion, creating this global exchange of ideas and influences that crosses borders.
We're seeing more cultural influences from around the world in mainstream fashion.
Absolutely. African prints, Japanese street style, traditional garments like the kimono being reinterpreted, it's all happening. The internet and social media have made it so much easier for these influences to spread, creating a global fashion community.
And fashion weeks aren't just in those traditional fashion capitals anymore.
Right, cities like Tokyo, Shanghai, Delhi, Sao Paulo, Copenhagen, they're all hosting fashion weeks, showing off local talent and styles. It's making the fashion world more diverse and inclusive.
But with all this exchange, it's important to talk about cultural appropriation versus appreciation.
It's a critical distinction. Cultural exchange can be great, but it's about appreciating and respecting other cultures, not just taking from them without understanding or giving credit. Brands need to be mindful of this and collaborate ethically with designers from different backgrounds.
We're also seeing more appreciation for traditional craftsmanship and artisan techniques from different cultures.
Definitely. Luxury brands are incorporating hand-woven textiles, hand-dyed fabrics, intricate embroidery from all over the world. It's supporting local economies and preserving these amazing skills, offering a real alternative to fast fashion.
But globalization has also fueled the fast fashion industry, which has its downsides.
True, globalization has made it easier for fast fashion brands to make cheap clothes quickly, following the latest trends. But it's come at a cost. Questionable labor practices, environmental damage, a culture of overconsumption.
But we're also seeing a rise in conscious consumerism in response to those concerns.
Absolutely. People are becoming more aware of the impact their choices have, and they're demanding more sustainable and ethical practices from brands. Secondhand shopping and vintage are also becoming more popular.
And technology has played a big role in this globalized fashion world.
Definitely. E-commerce lets designers reach customers anywhere in the world. Social media spreads trends instantly. And digital fashion in the metaverse is opening up a whole new world of possibilities.
It seems like globalization has created a more interconnected and diverse fashion landscape, but it also brings challenges that require careful thought and a commitment to sustainability. Now let's wrap up with a topic that's been woven throughout our conversation: sustainability. Is it really the new black in fashion?
I'd say it is. Sustainability isn't just a trend anymore, it's a necessity. It's transforming the entire fashion industry.
Let's break it down. What's the environmental impact of fashion as it stands today?
It's pretty grim. Fashion is a huge polluter. It uses tons of water, energy, and resources. Cotton farming and dyeing clothes are water-intensive and polluting. Fast fashion creates mountains of waste. The industry as a whole contributes a lot to global carbon emissions. It's not sustainable the way it is.
So what's the sustainable fashion movement all about?
It's about changing how we make, use, and dispose of clothes. It's about ethical production, using eco-friendly materials, and reducing the industry's carbon footprint. More brands are using sustainable fabrics, treating workers fairly, and adopting circular models.
And slow fashion seems to be a big part of that.
It is. Slow fashion is the opposite of fast fashion. It's about quality over quantity, buying clothes that last, supporting local production, repairing and reusing instead of throwing away.
And ethical fashion focuses specifically on the human side of things.
Yes. It's about making sure garment workers are treated fairly throughout the supply chain. It means paying fair wages, providing safe working conditions, and treating people with respect. There's a growing demand for transparency in how our clothes are made.
And there's so much innovation happening with eco-friendly fabrics and materials.
It's amazing. There's a move away from polluting synthetics toward natural fibers like organic cotton, hemp, linen, bamboo, and we're seeing recycled fabrics and even biofabricated materials made from things like mushrooms and algae.
Circular fashion sounds like a really promising idea.
It is. Circular fashion is all about keeping clothes in circulation for longer. It means renting clothes, buying secondhand, and having brands take back old clothes to recycle or resell.
And consumers have a lot of power to push for change.
They do. As more people make conscious choices and support sustainable brands, the industry has to change. Social media gives consumers a voice to demand better practices from brands.
It's great to see this shift happening. Sustainability isn't a fad, it's the future of fashion. While we've covered a lot today, what are some key things you want listeners to take away from this deep dive?
We've seen how fashion is this powerful language, how it reflects who we are and what's happening in the world. We've explored its history, the icons who've shaped it, the complex business side, how trends work, and the growing importance of technology and sustainability. It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. And to leave you with something to think about, fashion is so connected to our identity, our culture, and the planet. So as you look at your own wardrobe, what's one small change you could make that would have a positive impact? It's something worth reflecting on.
It really is.